Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into what is genuinely a massive paradigm shift in the AI landscape. Right now, there's a new open source model that has quietly stepped into the ring, and it is actively challenging the industry giants in a way we really haven't seen before. The established hierarchy of the tech world is shifting right beneath our feet, and we're going to look at exactly how and why this is happening.
So it brings us to a highly provocative question. Can a free open source model actually go toe-to-toe with a powerhouse like GPT 5.5? We're talking about GLM 5.2, which is built by a Chinese lab called ZAI. When it comes to real-world coding and complex agentic tasks, those multi-step problems where the AI works autonomously over time to find a solution, this model isn't just participating, it is fiercely competing. And the truly remarkable part? You can download this model and run it entirely for free. So let's figure out if it actually lives up to the hype. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll briefly meet the open source challenger, peek under the hood at its architecture, check out the benchmark showdown, look at some real-world applications, and finally, break down access, pricing, and our verdict.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Meet the Open Source Challenger. GLM 5.2 is ZAI's brand new flagship model, and it was explicitly purpose-built for those complex, long-horizon tasks we just mentioned. But before we get into the crazy specs, let's clarify exactly what we mean when we call this an open-weight model. The crucial point here is that anyone, you, me, a scrappy startup, or a massive enterprise, can literally download the actual model file and run it locally on our own hardware. There is zero vendor lock-in. You aren't tethered to a corporate API if you don't want to be. You own the execution. And when you do run it, you get access to this absolutely massive number, a genuinely usable 1 million token context window. This isn't just marketing fluff either. To put that into perspective, 1 million tokens is roughly equivalent to reading the entire Harry Potter series instantly. It's enough capacity to hold massive, complete codebases, incredibly dense legal documents, or just hours and hours of conversation history at a single time. The model can look across all of that data simultaneously to generate its response, which is absolutely vital for those long-horizon tasks.
Moving right along to Section 2, Under the Hood, looking at the architecture. And this brilliantly illustrates how the model operates so efficiently. GLM 5.2 uses what's called a mixture of experts architecture. Now, while the model itself is absolutely massive overall, sitting at around 744 billion total parameters, it's highly efficient, activating only about 40 billion parameters for any given response. That's actually the exact same active size as its predecessor, GLM 5.1. So ZAI didn't just throw brute force compute at the problem to make it bigger, they engineered it to be radically smarter and way more selective about which neural pathways it uses.
But the real secret weapon here is a new headline architectural change called index share. This mechanism reuses the same indexing across every 4 attention layers. So why does this matter to you? Well, because it cuts the computational cost per token by almost 3 times when you're working within that massive 1 million token context window. In plain English, index share is the exact mechanism that makes 1 million tokens actually practical and affordable to use, rather than just being a vanity metric on a spec sheet. Alongside index share, they've baked in improved speculative decoding. This lets the model predict multiple tokens at once, which gives you a generation speed boost of up to 20%. But honestly, perhaps the most disruptive point here is the license itself. GLM 5.2 is released under the MIT license. That means full commercial use is allowed with absolutely no regional limits and practically no usage restrictions. This is literally as open source gets.
Okay, let's jump to Section 3, the benchmark showdown. Let's look at the actual scoreboard. Now, what's really interesting about this is seeing how it stacks up on the highly trusted Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. GLM 5.2 is clearly pulling ahead of the pack. You can see it dominating with a score of 51. That establishes it as the new undisputed leader among all open-weight models, sitting comfortably ahead of incredibly formidable competitors like Minimax M3 and DeepSeek V4 Pro, which are both trailing back at 44. But let's methodically break down the developer scores, because this is where the model simulates actual real-world professional work. It hits an 81 on Terminal Bench 2.1 and a 62.1 on SWE Bench Pro, which are incredible scores for fixing bugs and operating in terminal environments. But look at that last row. the GD-Pavel AAV2 score of 1524. That specific metric measures real-world agentic task performance, and that 1524 effectively ties GLM 5.2 with GPT 5.5, running at its absolute highest reasoning setting. Just think about that for a second. We've got an open-source model matching one of the most elite closed models on the planet in real-world simulated work.
And it doesn't stop at coding. We're seeing massive scientific reasoning jumps too, with a 16-point gain on the CRIT-PEAT benchmark and a 12-point jump on the notoriously difficult HLE general knowledge test. But here is the holy grail. GLM 5.2 achieved the incredibly rare feat of simultaneously lowering its hallucination rate while increasing its overall accuracy compared to the previous generation. It is smarter and more honest. Trust me, that is a very, very hard technical problem to solve.
Which brings us to Section 4, Real-World Applications.
So, how do we actually use this thing?
Well, you can toggle between high and max thinking effort for multi-step agentic coding tasks. This means you, as the developer, can dial in the exact amount of reasoning power your coding agents need. If you need speed, you just dial it down. But if you have a messy, complex, long-horizon problem where the agent absolutely cannot lose track of its overarching goal, you crank that effort to max.
Let's see how this builds into fascinating new use cases, like code-to-video generation. Imagine you want to create a video. Instead of opening traditional editing software, you just give the model a plain language prompt describing what you want. GLM 5.2 then writes complex code using web and animation frameworks like React and Remotion, and that code executes to render directly into an MP4 video file. It literally programs the video into existence based entirely on your text prompt. Mind-blowing, right? But for those in incredibly strict environments, like legal, healthcare, or finance, total data privacy is perhaps the most critical application here. Because it's an open-weight model, you can run GLM 5.2 entirely on your own servers. Not a single prompt, not a single line of proprietary code ever has to leave your infrastructure. That level of absolute security is simply impossible to guarantee when you're relying on closed models like Claude or GPT.
Finally, Section 5. Access, pricing, and our verdict. Now, if you don't have the heavy hardware to pull the weights from Hugging Face and self-host, ZAI offers an API, and the pricing is incredibly aggressive. We're talking just $1.40 per million input tokens, $4.40 per million output tokens, and a staggering 26 cents for cache hits. Getting frontier-level GPT 5.5 tying performance at these exact price points, that completely changes the math for startups building high-volume AI applications.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire explainer, captured perfectly by this idea. This is proof that open-weight models aren't just good enough anymore. They are legitimately at the frontier. GLM 5.2 is undeniably one of the most important AI releases of the year because it shatters the established hierarchy. It proves that the most capable intelligence in the world absolutely doesn't have to be locked behind a corporate moat. So I'll leave you with this final thought as you look at your own tech stack. Are you team open source, ready to build with unrestricted models you can totally control? Or are you sticking with the closed models? The race has never been this tight, and the tools have literally never been this accessible. The choice is yours. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.